Good day, everyone. I hope you're having a great day so far. We've been getting some great feedback already on the webinars so far. Now let me introduce myself. My name is DJ Lamba. I'm the Vendor Business Manager for Westcon, and I look after the PaloAlto Networks business here in New Zealand. I would like to welcome you to PaloAlto Networks' second webinar for today, in which you'll hear about security leadership and how to be disruptive out there. This session will be presented by Sean Duca, Regional Chief Security Officer for JPAC at PaloAlto Networks. Before I hand over to Sean, we have a couple of housekeeping points. As again, firstly, please note this is a 20-minute session, so if you have any questions for Sean throughout the session, please keep putting them into the question and answer field, and we'll try to answer all the questions at the end of the session. And secondly, and more importantly, you'll be directed to a quick 1-minute survey at the end of this webinar. And if you answer the questions in our survey, you will be in to win a classic arcade game for your office for a week. So please make sure you do the fill in the survey. Over to you, Sean.
Awesome. Thanks, DJ, and kia ora, and thank you. It's a pleasure to be part of the Westcon-Comstor Imagine event, and great to actually sort of I guess present to all of you. And we're definitely going through some interesting times. And I think in the last 9 weeks, this is probably the background that most people will probably tend to have noticed and have seen behind me across the 7 different platforms that I think I've actually used across video conferencing tools and collaboration tools to talk to everyone from our customers, prospects, government organizations, and even just our partners as well. But what I really want to focus on and sort of take the time over the next just under 20 minutes is really focusing around what I think and believe are some key fundamentals that we should really be thinking about. And whilst COVID-19 has probably taken up the airwaves over the last 9+ weeks, and whilst we've actually been in lockdown, and I guess the 2 countries, Australia and New Zealand, are extremely fortunate that we're starting to get out of a lot of the social distancing, still maintaining social distancing, but a lot of the restrictions that were placed upon us are really starting to open up. But if I think about when it comes to disruption, challenges, things that we've really had to focus on over the last 9+ weeks, I really try and boil it down to a couple of key practices. And it's what I like to call the 4 key practices that we should have been doing at least these last 9 weeks. And if anything, definitely something that we need to carry forward and continue to do. Obviously, being a security practitioner, I always believe fundamentally that we are there to support the critical business operations from a security standpoint, mitigating risk. We can never completely eliminate risk. We're always working to ensure that we can maintain that level of risk appetite that every organization is there. But the key fundamental is making sure that we can run or maintain the critical operations inside every business at every single point in time. Irrespective of using people, process, and technology, we all need to always come together and have that element of focus to ensure that we can do that. If we think about how we start to reintroduce ourselves back into those working office environments that will be coming, no doubt, in the coming weeks, it's really going to be around how do we ensure that we can still maintain, the health and safety of our employees first and foremost. Maybe even have those A and B rosters of people coming and going into the office, but still working from home remotely. And that really comes down to just making sure that we've got an element of focus. I think what should never have changed, and hopefully hasn't changed in your own respective organizations, is going through and keep on fundamentally testing every single plan that we've got. But think about what we had to embark on 9 weeks ago was really around how do we quickly scale up our operations to ensure that we could work from home. You probably would have heard from my colleague Jason earlier today talking about leveraging technology of how you could rapidly surge and have that ability to do that. But the other key part is how do we ensure that we can maintain some form of business continuity? And I think that definition of business continuity has fundamentally changed too. I think we've always thought about in the event of a flood, a fire, some sort of tropical disaster that could actually sort of take place and knock out a building. We never really probably thought too far ahead about what would actually happen in terms of a pandemic, something that we actually have gone through and still going through. What does disaster look like? And every single one of these scenarios need to be tested every single time. We also need to think about, and if you haven't already, think about how do we ensure that we've actually got the right supply chain mechanisms in place. So we're constantly just testing and looking to see what is every single machination that could possibly take place moving forward of how we keep on sort of reiterating all this one. The work from home context, I don't think it's ever going to change, and it's probably not going to go away at all. I think you could probably honestly say that every organization has spent probably a good part of the last number of years they've been operating, really focusing on probably about 20 to 30% of their employee workforce working remotely. I think what's probably changed now is we're going to be leaning more towards 50+%. In speaking to some organizations, they're talking about 80+%. Others have even said, we are probably going to be working from home for a very long time to come, and we're not even going to force our employees to actually come back to the office. So the dynamic has changed. But what that also means is the way that we actually monitor and think about how our employees are actually going out there. And I'll talk about how the threat model has actually changed around that one. But now that we've got everyone coming through, VPNs and different types of connectivity, people leveraging SaaS or cloud-based services more and more, we need to think about how do we actually monitor and maintain some level of visibility around that at all times. And a key part that we always need to be thinking about is that balancing equation, the risk versus reward. Every single CISO that I've probably spoken to over the last 9 weeks has really talked about how, not that they've dropped their guard or they're reducing their security posture, but it's more around how do they actually maintain some of those risk measures and balance that out. I've heard of stories where some government agencies that were never really focused on using laptops and were very workstation driven, literally went around and dropped off 35,000 workstations from one government agency to every single employee. And they had to work out how do they actually allow these people to print to their local printer when they'd removed the local admin rights. So the job of the CISO or a CIO who's actually responsible for security really had to focus on how do they maintain and manage all of this, whilst at the same time trying to keep the lights on and maintain the critical operations of every single one of their businesses. So what I've actually thought about is there's 3 fundamental phases that every organization will go through. And this is not a case of this won't apply to us or this is going to be a little bit different. But I believe that we're seeing this shift happening not only in New Zealand or Australia, but globally. We're actually seeing this take place right now. So phase 1 is probably the best way to describe it is we've done this. And you can probably sit down and even scorecard and benchmark yourself and say, how well did we do phase 1? We automatically turned around at sort of overnight and said, how do we now scale our operations to allow every single employee to go out and work remotely? Some organizations were a little bit more fortunate where maybe they had some forward planning or forward thinking around it. Some people just simply added more capacity to allow more VPN connectivity to take place. And all they really did was try and solve a bandwidth connectivity challenge. But they never really thought probably too much about how do we provide this as a secure remote access solution. Remote access is something that we've been doing probably for more than 20 plus years that I've actually been in the industry. We've been talking about remote access. But it really comes down to having an understanding of how do we just simply burst and scale up and allow everyone to do everything they need to do. Unfortunately, over the last 9 weeks, I never really had a moment to have Netflix and chill. So it was all about how do we keep on maintaining the lights on. As an organization such as PaloAlto Networks, we are a high-tech company. We've always believed in this remote office concept. So for us, it was simply just a case of let's just burst up and surge that capability. Phase 2, I think, is where most organizations probably are right now. And it's really around how do we go through and review our business continuity plans, how do we look at the processes that we've actually got in place, and how do we even redefine what the business looks like moving forward. And that's where we're starting to understand what are the critical operations that are needed in the event if we did go through a second wave. What would it actually look like? Could we actually go back and say we could still keep on doing this for the next couple of months? As unfortunate as that will actually be, could we actually sustain to do this for a little bit longer if we had to? I talked to some organizations where, 5 years ago when they drafted a business continuity plan, they had SAP, which is kind of the cash register, for lack of a better term, that was actually running on premise. Now they're currently using SAP HANA, which is basically just sitting out in AWS infrastructure. So their business continuity plans were a little bit defunct and had to be updated and modernized. But where I think every organization will go through is really redesigning, redefining what the new normal will actually be. And this is where I pretty much turn around and go, rather than people going to work, we're going to really start to think about how do we now bring work to people. And what that really means is we're going to start to leverage new ways to actually try and do this. And this is where I believe that we talk about disruption. And from a security leadership standpoint, we have to change what we do. My personal mantra in life is do different. And if I think about the last 5 years of PaloAlto Networks, whatever I've actually done to get to this point, that playbook will not have 5 years. So we have to do something different. We've been forced to do it, and I think we need to continue to do that. And one of the reasons why is definitely around the threats. From a threat perspective, our Unit 42 Threat Intelligence Group have really been looking at what the threat actors have been doing these last number of weeks. And over the space of the last 7 weeks alone, we saw that a number of different COVID-19, Corona-style themes of threats really coming out there. Leveraging, the old techniques. Leveraging ways where people were simply just launching phishing attacks, business email compromised emails, where they're trying to trick people into breaking some of those processes that are really there. We saw ransomware attacks, and as unfortunate as it actually sounds, we saw ransomware attacks that were targeting pharmaceutical companies that were actually tasked with actually working on building out the vaccine. They were targeting hospitals. They were targeting organizations that were focused on critical infrastructure. And over the last 6 or 7 weeks, we actually saw that 1.2 million newly registered domains were actually created using a COVID, corona, or virus-related theme. So what that actually means, think about it for a second. We've got 1.2 million new websites that have actually been created that are malware-laden, that could actually contain some type of lure or some sort of a trick that we've actually seen where a cyber criminal is trying to get access to your information. They're trying to get access to our systems that we've actually got out there, people working from home. At the same time, coincidence or not, we actually saw that there was a number of different threat actors that were constantly scanning the internet for particular vulnerabilities that may have existed in D-Link, Linksys, Sonic Wall routers, and really trying to target old vulnerabilities that have actually been detected in the home routers. Cyber criminals know that we are working from home right now. And they're trying to work out, well, how do I get into your system? Because if we're remotely accessing all the information, whether it be in public cloud infrastructure, software as a service, systems that are actually sitting inside your data center, they're trying to work out that vantage point. If I'm an organization that's got 1,000 employees that are remotely working, guess what I've actually done in phase 1? I've now created 1,000 vantage points that are effectively going to be a target for a cyber criminal group to get out there. So we see this playing out more and more, and this is why the concept of do different is an absolute imperative. We have to change the way that we've actually been doing security, purely for the fact that we keep on seeing these different types of campaigns coming out there, and that's just the threat. But I always don't look at it just purely from a threat model perspective or a threat angle, because yes, that is something that's definitely going to target a crisis. And a crisis will always continue. If I look at Australia alone, we're in the month of May and we've had not only the pandemic, we've had bushfires, we've had storms actually hit us that have actually knocked out a number of parts of our country. So a crisis will always be there. And I think we should always plan to be resilient. And that's where we've always focused more around, business resiliency. If a building was wiped out, what would we do? Well, we need to start to cast our gaze a little bit further around what does cyber resilience really mean? Because these types of threats, ransomware style threats will keep on coming out. But it's more a case of how do we now start to really disrupt ourselves and say, what's a better way to do it? And that better way for me is where we start to say, these industries will continue to be targeted. They'll keep on being targeted. And this is across the Asia Pacific and Japan region of where we've actually seen a number of different organizations targeted. And this is just telemetry that customers have actually shared with us to our threat intelligence cloud. Some obviously decide to not actually share some of this information. So sometimes it can actually get skewed somewhat. But the reality is we're seeing a lot of people that are currently being targeted. Wholesale and retail, no surprises. That's where money is. People are leveraging a lot of the e-commerce information that's actually out there. Professional and legal. We are still going through the process of, looking at mergers and acquisitions and a range of different types of information that's actually out there. Government still needs to run critical operations. So at the backdrop of all of those threats, we need to be thinking about how does technology enable us to do something different? And this is where I believe that technology in that phase 3 for us is how we deliver work to our users. And that's going to be through the use of technology, where they can access any bit of information, any application from any system at any time. And that's an absolute must. That's a non-negotiable point that we need to think about. But the final piece around that one is we also need to think about how do we now surge and spike that up accordingly? Because what I believe is that the concept or the context around the campus, so let's call it our headquarters, the branch, even the remote office worker actually changes. And even from a commercial real estate perspective, having spoken to a number of organizations that are in that space, they're talking about it right now where I spoke to an organization, very large corporate, a large corporate provider of office space said, we really don't need a lot of this office floor space anymore. So we're probably going to reduce that because we know there's going to be a lot of people that are actually be working from home. But there's going to be times that people start to come in. So we need to think about how do we start to surge and do that. What I've also started to see is people really sort of moving a little bit forward and aggressively going through their digital transformation journey. And again, think about disruption. You know, the analogy or the story that I use, particularly in Australia, is 9 weeks ago, we probably never heard of, you know, any other type of food delivery service in Australia that was other than Uber Eats, Deliveroo, and DoorDash. Today, I've probably got every single restaurant that is actually providing a delivery service. So they're actually disrupting the main players that are actually out there. A lot of those restaurants have also turned into greengrocers and are providing their own suppliers. So everyone is trying to work out, it's a case of survive or die, unfortunately. And we're seeing this massive shift right now where people are really thriving around leveraging digital technology. You know, PaloAlto Networks is an example. We have a number of field marketing professionals that have always been focused on doing industry events similar to this, but in person. And overnight, 9 weeks ago, they had effectively turned into leveraging digital channels for every single thing that they were actually doing. This is something every business has to go through. I've seen people now start to accelerate projects around how do they shift everything they've actually got sitting in their own on-premise infrastructure out to public cloud, consuming more software as a service. You know, but at the end of the day, the key thing around you leveraging any type of cloud medium in the public cloud infrastructure, anything you put into the cloud, it's a responsibility up to you to actually protect what you put in there. They'll protect the underlying infrastructure, but you need to think about doing that. So I've seen a lot of organizations that are aggressively starting to roll out brand new applications that are sitting out in the cloud, migrating some of their old legacy solutions. This will continue. So even in times that we believe that and we definitely know that we're going to be experiencing a lot of economic hardship and economic hard times coming ahead, the key thing is how do we now really start to extract a lot of value out of technology that we've got, or simply start to say vendor consolidation is ripe right now. I've had more conversations with CIOs and executives around, you know, we spend a lot of money on different things. And definitely in a security context, people are saying, I have one of everything. So now is the time you want to start to think about how do you leverage a platform that can enable you to start to really secure this. If you take cloud as the example, we talk about that as the perfect example. You know, from your whole journey of going from cradle to grave, so to speak, in the cloud, you need to think about every single possible way that you're going to be leveraging cloud. First and foremost, that could be how do I secure everything that's a lift and shift of any workload from my physical data center out into public cloud. Anything inline, I need to scan it. I need to have audit and visibility and compliance control at all times. But then as I start to leverage what I like to call the new endpoint, which is around containers, serverless security, I need to think about how do I secure that? And the same also applies with things such as security operations. Our entire security operations center right now is run out of people's houses. Our head of security operations center ran a webinar with his daughter sitting on his lap, which is something that you've probably all seen over many Zoom calls, WebEx calls, and any other collaboration tool that's out there. But again, we're going to keep on leveraging a lot more of these types of collaborative tools that are out there, and it's really around how do we start to secure that. You know, I think every single time we need to go back to those 4 key practices that I talked about: focus, test, monitor, and balance. And as you go through that journey of looking at digital transformation and how technology can actually really help you enable that. And digital transformation is not just simply about technology. It's about disrupting the business and operating models that you've actually got inside your own organization. Technology may help you achieve that, but digital transformation is about doing something different. And I think a key part that we really need to focus on is all around resilience. And 3 fundamentals that I believe in anything that comes down to cyber resilience is first and foremost, we need to maintain that continual awareness around how do we ensure that we're making the right we're having the right discussions. Our senior leadership team should be communicating at all times. Now more than ever, we definitely want to ensure that we're talking to our employers and raising the awareness about all the challenges that are actually out there and how they protect themselves. We should be using it as an opportunity every time there's a help desk call that comes into the help desk. Why don't we actually use that as an opportunity to check what our users are doing on their home routers? Do you actually have some encryption turned on and securing your home router the right way? Because now they're effectively some of our new officers that we've got. Secondly, adopt that mindset of resilience, and not just simply around the fact of a building could be wiped out, but more how to ensure that we can maintain that level of operation. If something goes down, it's still going to run over here. So we start to think about availability. We start to think about different locations of how things can actually work. And by adopting that mindset, we can then start to think about continually practicing. Business continuity plans are all about ensuring that we can just maintain that continuity. A disaster strikes, we know what to do. An incident response plan is in place. It's all about how quickly can I respond. So two fundamental things that I always look at from a security context to present back to our board is around how quickly can I respond to a threat, so mean time to respond and mean time to detect. You may actually find out that it probably takes you 3 weeks to detect a brand new threat, or it could take you 2 weeks to even respond to a threat. At least you know what your benchmark is, and then you start to work down from there. Leverage security automation and orchestration as much as you possibly can. So a key takeaway from all of this is, hopefully you've actually learned that disruption is possible. And I fundamentally believe that now more than ever, we have to do something different. We're going to be going through some interesting times, even more than what we probably have experienced the last 9 weeks. And what every single economic downturn has probably shown us, that we're really going to have to go back to the drawing board and say, how do I really start to stack up what the true business value is of making a change? And it's all about how do we disrupt the way that we've done something. The analogy or the quote that I love using time and time again is by Albert Einstein. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. Security is no different to that. So with that, thank you very much, and hopefully you will do something different and really disrupt yourselves, because now is the time to actually do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. That was really, really good. I'm waiting for some more questions to come in. So please, guys, ask any questions in the question and answer field if you want Sean to answer them. Sean, while we're waiting for some questions, I had one come through on my text actually. How can we utilize your capabilities and yourself for some thought leadership discussions with some C-levels in New Zealand?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm definitely more than happy to have these conversations pretty much any day of the week. So I think probably the best way to do it is probably just to corral everything through yourself, DJ.
Yeah.
So if anyone needs to leverage me to have those conversations, please contact DJ, and we can definitely sort of organise that. I'm sure DJ will be able to sort of provide his contact details, but by all means, whether it's a Zoom conference or using any other type of collaboration tool of choice that you've actually got out there, happy to do that. A phone call is never too far away, and I respond to messages at weird and wonderful hours all the time. So by all means, it's simply a case of asking.
Are you more available now that you're not traveling as much?
Absolutely. So, and the beauty of it is, I think our entire organisation has worked that out. So I have usually spent probably about 150 days away from home every year travelling. The last 9 weeks, this is probably the backdrop that I said that everyone has seen me, and people love it. So I don't have a commute, I don't have a travel, I don't have a rigorous travel schedule, and 12, 13 hour Zoom days where I'm constantly getting up and stretching halfway through. Part and parcel of what I've been living. So yeah, definitely more access now.
Perfect. Okay, great. Just seeing another question. So are you seeing the same patterns across JPAC, or are there some more localized threats?
So look, we're pretty much seeing the same thing consistently globally. Obviously, we've got a lot less pharmaceutical companies here in the Asia Pacific region, or the JPAC region, but we're still seeing people targeted. Business email compromise, I think I've seen this consistently across many different organizations. Phishing emails, absolutely, we've seen this consistently. And I think, again, this is where we just really need to just always be vigilant. People have asked me, is now a time that you would really want to send out, something as simple as a phishing test to your employees. And I think absolutely, whilst we're dealing with the pandemic, we should always be thinking about how do we test our employees.
Well, okay, I think we've got Jason on unmute here.
Formation of backs and necks and things like that.
Oops. Yeah, sorry about that. I think Jason in the background is speaking. Right, and I think I am looking for any more questions here. So I understand we are already at least 5 minutes over time here.
Right.
So Sean, thank you so much. We will pass the questions to you if somebody all the questions we have on the question and answer panel. But yeah, it will be really great to see you again in New Zealand. Hopefully, this travel restrictions go away.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
No, okay. Thanks, DJ. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And everybody, thank you so much for your time. And please do not forget to fill in the survey. And you may be getting that classic arcade game in your office. Thank you.